So tonight, David spoke to us about how God is more. And I love that idea. In fact, that idea that our best efforts at articulating God's goodness pale in comparison to the reality of his goodness. He's not just a God who is good, but he is the entirety of what goodness is. That small glimpse of goodness that we see here in the acts of others, that is a reflection of God who is good. God, who's greater than our ability to articulate. That's powerful. What do you need God to do in your life tonight? He's more. He's more than willing and capable to come and to touch your life. And then Katie, talking about God as faithful. How beautiful. As a young girl, she came, just like many of you here, and made that commitment to pray for her future husband. And don't tell me that prayers don't answer, God doesn't answer prayers, that they're left unanswered. God hears those prayers, and he does that work. He is faithful. He's faithful and just. He's ready to meet that need that you have and to hear that prayer of your heart. Tonight, I want to talk to you about God who's here. It's an amazing thing for me because I think this is probably, interestingly enough, the most difficult thing for me to get my head around. That God is going to be with me no matter how messy I am. There's a lot of times in my life where I feel like I don't even want to be around myself. Why would God want to be around me? Like, I'm sick and tired of me. How could God not be sick and tired of me? Sometimes I think God looks down from heaven and says, "Oh, myself." He did it again. God is here, though. When I was a little boy, I was 4 years old. I was pretty awesome, as you can tell, with my round little body, my legs rubbing together. You know what was popular when I was a kid? Like nylon in shoes. Nike shoes. Like, I wanted so bad these cool, sweet tennis shoes. Or Adidas had these sweet, awesome tennis shoes. The problem was my feet are allergic to nylon. So as a small kid, I wore nylon shoes, and basically I needed medical attention. It's like my feet exploded. I had to wear Keds, which is basically dorky shoes for dorky boys. What you wearing? Keds. Then, my friends were usually skinnier than I was. I would try to match my belt notch the same as theirs. I lost blood flow to my brain. Hasn't affected me at all. Christmas time, around my fourth year of existence, had the greatest toys ever. The 70s were awesome about toys. We had this thing called walkie-talkies. Spider-Man walkie-talkies with Morse code, because you never know when you need to use Morse code. Most of the time, the walkie-talkies didn't work properly. It was like talking into a can. I can't understand you. Help. 4, almost 5, and we were going to my grandparents' house, and usually you know that there's one set of grandparents that are cooler than the others, right? Do you understand that? Like, one set of grandparents understand their job is to spoil you rotten and to basically feed you sugar constantly. You know how grandparents' houses are usually 900 degrees, and they're always cold, and then you go to the rock candy, and there's like a big chunk of candy that's morphed together. Just gonna have a little piece of candy. Oh my gosh. My grandparents, my cool grandparents, they were so awesome. We could go to the grocery store, and my grandma, she would go, which was boring mostly for kids, but we could go to the candy aisle, and my grandma would open up some candy, and we'd sample it. It's called stealing. Yes. But my grandma would let me pick whatever cereal I wanted, which was amazing, because back in the 70s, again, we had great cereal and great prizes. We had Count Chocula, Frankenberry, Boo Berry. We had, of course, Honeycomb and Trixer for kids, and Frosted Flakes, which is delicious, sugary yumminess. And then on the back of the Cookie Crisp box, there was a record. A record is a round device that we would cut out and put on a record player. So I'm at my cool grandparents' house, and I juxtaposed my cool grandma with my not cool grandma. Her name was Arda, and Grandma Arda was blind. I had nothing to do with that. But my Grandma Arda used to basically, I think my mother and my Grandma Arda were like, we're going to not let him have sugared cereal. And so they would feed me the most evil cereal on the planet, grape nuts, which for a small child is a bowl of rocks. I think a dentist invented that. There's something wrong with cereal when you can leave the milk in it for like a few minutes and then it solidifies and you can turn your bowl upside down and nothing comes out. You can putty and drywall with grape nuts. It's no wonder we couldn't go to the bathroom. So we had cereal to help solve that. We had bran flakes, which looked like a bowl of scabs for small children. Yeah. You should be grossed out. That's my childhood. And we had shredded wheat. Have you seen that? Somebody like, I like shredded wheat. It has the frosting on the one side. No. That would have been good. No. There was no happiness, no sugar. Came in a big red box with a gigantic white feed bag, and you'd rip it open, and there's a bale of hay in there. You'd put it in a bowl. You'd have to chop it up with a spoon so that really fine, or else the shredded wheat would cut your throat on the way down. You'd show up to school with blood on the perimeter of your lips. Kids would be like, did you get in a fight? I had breakfast. I need to go to the doctor's. The worst cereal of all was All Bran, which looked the same way going in as it did going out. I always thought it'd be awesome if that cover of the cereal box had two senior adults staring into each other's eyes with a little look of panic and a caption that says, "The prize comes later." Yeah. So there's that. So I'm at my cool grandma's house in Michigan, right outside of Detroit, and we had, let's go Tigers. Lions and Bears. Okay, so, Tiger. So, long story longer, basically, I was so pumped that Christmas, because I got some great presents, tons of sugar, and I'm having a blast. And I'll never forget this Christmas, as long as I live, because my father came into, into the kitchen or whatever and said, "Chris, I want to talk to you." And so we went out to the living room, and it was kind of that father-son moment, and he knelt down, and he looked at me, and he said, "Chris, when you get home from this vacation, I'm not going to be there anymore." And so my father decided to tell me during Christmas that he was leaving my mother and my sister and I to basically go be with another woman. And our life changed that day. He was no longer there. He wasn't there in my life. And I know he wanted to be. I just will never fully understand the dynamic of it, but he just could not figure out how to love my mother. And that choice that he made changed our life forever. And I think because of that, there's always been something inside of my head, and probably even a little bit inside of my gut, that says, "Chris, one day, God is just going to be tired of your junk, and he's going to leave." See, I'm probably an expert at the angry Jesus picture. I think that's where I've been a lot in my life. And people say God is here, that he is here for you, and he wants to do something amazing in your life. But it's hard to change the way you think when, as a young kid, those important people in your life leave or let you down or pass away. We could say, I'll be here for you forever. And the truth is, we won't, because we're mortal. And as a father looks in the eyes of a child and says, no matter what, I'm here for you, there is a day when dirt will go over the casket and there's an emptiness that's left in the hearts of so many. What do I mean when I say God is here? He's here, just like Katie was talking about, in our storms. He's present in the most difficult parts of our life, and he's there to celebrate those joy-filled moments too. In other words, in all of what it means for us to be human, God is there. I had so much fun with my grandparents, but that day was a monumental day in my life because my father chose a different life. One day I was out in the driveway, and I think sometimes it's just fun to watch little kids play. They have great imaginations. The other day I walked in, my son, Noah, told me to come around to the side because my little daughter, Ella, was sitting on top of the air conditioning unit, and it was running. And so she was so happy because it made her pink dress floof up and out, and she was batting her hair back and forth, and she thought she was the prettiest girl on the planet as she sat on top of the air conditioning unit. I think it's fun to watch little kids because there's such an innocence about them. They can be in a moment, and they can savor that moment and cherish that moment in a way that we can't, it seems, anymore. What does it mean for us to have that childlike faith and see God is there for us? I was out in the driveway, and I was having a little kid moment. I was probably on a pogo stick trying to count as many times as I could jump, One. The other thing I remember vividly about that driveway was the electronic door opener. Now, again, this is in the 70s where it didn't have an automatic thing that would kick back up when fat children got stuck. And I, of course, thought I was going to be stealth-like as I rolled into its presence, trying to get my fat little body through the opening. I'm going to press the little knob, and it's going to come down, and I'm going to pretend I'm like a espionage, like a little round Batman. And this is a true story. I got stuck under the door, and I'm thinking, I can't move. That has nothing to do with the story. But I wanted you to imagine me stuck. I'm playing out there, and I'm having a great time. Probably pretending to be one of the Apple Dumpling gang. There's something nobody will remember. What happened? I look down the road, and a car comes driving down the road, and there it is. My dad's car. I think it looks just like my father's car. But that can't be. Because my dad had moved out of state. He no longer lived there with us in North Dakota. And I only saw him on the summer holidays or maybe like Christmas break. But sure enough, that car gets closer and closer, and it looks just like my dad's car. And as it drives up into the driveway, I look over, and there he is. It's my father. You guys, I was elated. I loved being with my dad. My dad was an athlete, a man's man. He was super cool, got football scholarship, was incredibly popular. None of those genes seemed to come to me, but whatever. He gets out of the car, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing here? I was so pumped, kind of almost stuttering for words, and he said, I need to talk to your mom. And so we went upstairs, and he started to talk to my mom, and then they both came outside, and they stood there right in front of me. And my mother looked at me, and she said, Chris, your dad just traveled all the way from Minnesota, and he wanted to see if you wanted to go with him and spend this holiday weekend, just you and him, a father-son kind of break. The problem is that weekend, which is a 2-day, 3-day holiday, we had like a parent-teacher or a teacher day or whatever it was, we had the Monday off. And so we had decided we were going to go from North Dakota down to South Dakota to visit my best friends who had just moved. And I was so pumped because these guys were seriously the greatest friends on the planet. And I'd been looking forward to this trip forever. And now my father was there, and he wanted me to go with him instead of going with my friends. And I was young, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted my mom to make the decision for me. And so I looked at her expectantly, and I said, like, what should I do? Like, and she said, you have to make this decision on your own. Like, we're still going to go down and visit our friends, but, your father did come for you. What do you want to do? And I said, well, what about Carrie, my sister? And she said, well, she's too little. And I said, okay, what should I do? She said, you have to make this choice on your own. And you guys, I was sick to my stomach. I wanted to be with my dad so bad, and I knew it was like the right thing to do in a lot of ways, but I knew I was going to have the best time ever with my friends. This is what we'd been looking forward to, and I'm sick about it. And finally, I looked at my dad and I said, Dad, I'm not gonna go with you. I didn't know you were coming. I'm gonna go see my friends. My dad, he probably tried to say something nice to me so I wouldn't feel bad. And he got into the car, and then he started the car and he backed up. And it was like time stopped. It's a hard thing to explain, but I could see his face through the windshield of the car very clearly. And I could see that my father was crying. And I realized my choice hurt my father deeply. And he drove away. And that whole time there was something inside of me that was just aching to yell out, stop, come back. But even as he drove away, and even with that death I felt, I still was torn. I don't know how to tell you this, but it was I lost something about myself that day. I lost something. I must have realized that my actions have power that can amazingly impact me for the positive or the negative. I was devastated. And we went to go visit my friends that day. It was the worst experience I'd ever had. Those few days with my friends, the only thing that kept going over and over in my mind was this truth: you could be with your Father. He came for you. God is here. He's come for you. I want you to listen to me. Look at me. God has come for you. He is your Father. Says he'll never leave you or forsake you. God is here, and he's coming for you. In a few minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to participate in something that's called adoration. And as we start to get set up here, you're going to recognize something very important, that we don't do this accidentally. We don't participate in adoration accidentally. Look at me. It's very serious. Because we're going to recognize as a group that God is present among us, truly present in the Eucharist. And our bodies are going to show that we see that we believe that. And while I'm speaking to you a little bit about this, you're going to see the guys and the gals as they put up the altar. And what we're going to have is a moment and a time of prayer together. I want you to look at me. In your mind, there's some of you here that are still worrying about what your friends might think if you really give yourself to God. And some of you maybe are still trying to think I don't know if I believe in all of that stuff, Chris. I'm not sure about really Jesus in this thing called the Eucharist anyway. Here's what I want you to do tonight. What I want you to do is I want you to give God permission to speak to you. You listening? Because he won't force you, but he's going to invite you. So you get to say yes to him. And it doesn't have to be, yes, I give my entire life to you, I commit myself to you. It could be simply, yes, I'll let you speak to me tonight. You listening? If I could give you one word of encouragement, it would be this. Do not make the mistake that I made as a small boy. Choosing your friends, which is great so often, cannot compare to what it means to choose God. Last little story as we get ready to pray together. I have a little boy, Joe. You heard about Joe. He's a little mischievous thug. Do you understand? He's chubby, just like his daddy. And Joe, he had a bronchial problem, and so we had to take him to the hospital here in town. And one of the cool things about our hospital is that it has the Eucharist there. There's a small, tiny little chapel. And tiny little Joe was there, and he had to shove his chest up against the x-ray machine, and they had to take pictures, and it was a little bit of an ordeal. He didn't feel good, and tiny. And as we're walking out, I said to little Joe, I said, Joe, let's go in and let's see Jesus for a few minutes. He's right here. He's in the tabernacle. Let's go say hi. And he said, okay. And so we walked into this tiny little church. And what's kind of sweet about that little church is that right off to the right is this little tiny room where there's a tabernacle. And the tabernacle is that big gold box, right? Or the little box that we have our Lord in. And sometimes you've probably been alert enough to see that there's a candle that's right next to that tabernacle. And if the candle's lit, that means that the Eucharist is there, that Jesus is present. And so we walked in, and little Joe and I, right after his x-rays, we walked in and we knelt down before our Lord in the Eucharist. And I prayed for a few minutes and asked the Lord, of course, to bless my son and help him to feel better. And I said to little Joe, I said, let's say goodbye to Jesus. And he got up, which I wasn't expecting, and he walked right up to the tabernacle. And little tiny Joe reached his hand out. Now I'm getting a little nervous. I'm thinking, what's he doing? Are we going to be okay? And I felt like it was okay for me to just relax and watch. And he reached his hand out, and he gently touched the edge of the tabernacle. And little Joe says with this tiny little voice, I love you, Jesus. See, the reality of what we're talking about is simple. It's so simple, a tiny little kid can understand. Jesus has come for you. He's calling to you. He's inviting you into a relationship. That's what we're talking about. That's what Katie was emphasizing in her talk. I mean, that's what David is saying. He's so much more than we ever thought or imagined. He's not just holy. He's not just good. He's not just amazing, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnivore. He's not just all of those things, right? But God, he's great, but he's so great because he chooses to come to us. And I want you to think about something amazing is that today, you're going to see Jesus. The same Francis fell in love with and gave himself to is the same Jesus who's going to come down here and be before you in the Eucharist. The same Jesus that St. Dominic fell in love with, right, is going to come down and be right here. The same Jesus St. John Paul II gave his life to and loved is the same Jesus here. The same Jesus, Blessed Teresa of Calcutta. The same Jesus, St. Philomena and St. Juan Diego and St. Ambrose and St. Anselm and St. Ignatius and St. what? On and on and on. All those saints saw Jesus and they gave themselves to him. And they loved him. Jesus gave himself so completely. Here's the other thing to know tonight. Is that Jesus will allow you to misunderstand him tonight. This is mind-blowing. But here he is in the Eucharist. He'll be here in just a second. Body, blood, soul, divinity. It might look like bread, but it's only Jesus. And in his humility, Jesus will allow you to fall asleep even on him. He'll allow you to ignore him, to be distracted by other things. In his humility, all deity in bodily form will allow you to freely worship him or not. This is your time. He's here for you because he loves you. He's here for you because he's ready for you to come back to him. He's here for you because because. And all my words pale in comparison to the reasons why. I can't articulate why he's so captivated with you, but he is. Maybe tonight you could be like little Joe, with all of your sickness and all of your weariness and just exhaustion and maybe even with all of your just lack of belief. You could just say those tiny little words, Jesus, I love you. Help me to love you more. Or Jesus, I give you the chance to speak to me. I want you to close your eyes for just a second. Adoration. We're going to do something that we only do to God. We're going to adore him. We have fancy words for this, okay? We dulia the saints, which means we have a veneration, and we'll even have a sense of worship. But it's not the best that we can do. It says we hyperdulia the Blessed Mother, because she's the saint of all saints, you know? But that's not the best that we can do. And what we do is, in the Latin, the word is latria. We adore God. We adore. And that's the only thing that we can do. We can only latria God. We can't latria any of the saints. That's idolatry. So what we're going to do today is so unique and so specific. Jesus comes to us. That Eucharist in that monstrance, which means to show, it's Jesus. And as he walks by, he's come here for you. He's right here. That Jesus the saints loved and lived for is right here. And I wonder, who is God to you? Who is Jesus to you? He's more than you've ever thought or imagined. And he's faithful to love you and speak to you, even if you're struggling with faith. For me tonight, it will be a beautiful blessing, because it'll be the reminder that I need that Jesus has still not given up on me in all of my dysfunctions.